Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Today, we're going to talk about the funeral industry and how to ensure that you're being treated fairly. As environmental awareness grows, many are seeking more sustainable ways to honor our departed loved ones. But it's equally important to navigate these decisions with transparency and trust. Joining us today is Melissa Meadow, better known as the Modern Mortician. She's a licensed funeral director and is passionate about educating people on what to watch out for in an industry that has become increasingly profit driven. Melissa also believes that the green funeral business, including practices like aquamation and terramation, can do a better job of respecting both people and the planet. So let's start the conversation. Melissa, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to educate more people.
Can you start by sharing your journey into the death care industry and what inspired you to become a licensed funeral director? And then we'll talk about you getting out of that.
Yeah. It is an interesting story. It was before my senior year of high school. There was a local family-owned funeral home. It was featured on a news segment as one of a family-owned businesses that was hiring for the summer. And I got the job. Um, Initially answering doors, answering phones, running errands. Back then you had to take death certificates to the doctor and do the vital statistics and everything else like that. Um, then one day I was invited to the back to see an embalming from an autopsy. And it fascinated me. What I saw that fascinated me was the inside of the skull, what they called the calvarum. The guys were trying to freak me out, but it was the fissures in the bone. It was something that not everybody sees on a normal basis. And it inspired me. The beauty of the body inspired me to want to recreate people. What they were doing in the embalming room were taking people that were sick and frail and making them look whole again, like they could sit up and talk to you. And the artistry behind that is what initially drew me to funeral care, besides the fact of thinking, you can't hurt them, they're already dead, and it would be me giving back, in a way that I wasn't able to do within my own family. So as I entered mortuary school and finished with that and got out into the field, something I started to ask was, why are we putting people in these vaults in this other stuff when this side of the cemetery that's really old just probably has people in pine boxes, if anything? And the more I learned, the more I was disturbed. So the grave cemetery sextons would have deals with the vault companies who would have deals with the funeral homes and the casket companies, and they'd all have their hands in it. And it wasn't at the benefit of the person or the family that had just suffered a loss. And that bothered me. I don't know if it's the justice portion of me, but I was like, people need to know these things to make their own decisions. And so as I started speaking about green burial before it got super popular online, people were paying attention. And the funeral industry, good old boys or old gang, didn't really like that. So they started to pay attention too. And I built a platform being transparent with people about their options, which kind of made me a pariah to the industry where I couldn't get a regular job that would give me insurance, sustain me, et cetera, and so forth. So I was really flying by the seat of my pants, which I'm now back to doing again, but for better reasons. There was a lot that I saw in the funeral industry from Texas to Washington that I don't want to be a part of anymore. And I'm working on ways to educate people on what that is without hurting them. Because, like myself, knowing what I know now about embalming, I, I'm hurt to think that that ever happened to a family member of mine. And I've had conversations with other people that when they've asked what the process is, you can tell them as gentle as you want to, but it is still a very intense and intense process.
I'm curious about that process since you've done it so much and
Ooh,
being a person who's never seen that process. Um, as I said, I'm curious. Can you tell us about it?
yes. So when a decedent is brought into the care of the funeral home and permission is acquired to embalm for preparation purposes, um, The body is undressed, bathed, typically with like a Dawn soap or a shampoo. They're just washing the body down. Um, then features are set, so they'll set firm in the way that they want to be done, the eyelids, the lips, and stuff like that. They make an incision right here above this collarbone, and it's about an inch and a half long, and you break through the muscle fascia. Go on, break through the muscle fascia, um, in the tissue there, and you raise the carotid artery and the jugular vein. And you make a nick in the jugular vein, so you'll have drainage, and you make a nick in the artery, so you can insert a cannula, which is connected to a tube, which is connected to the embalming machine. And in the embalming machine, you mix fluids, embalming chemicals, water, and it's pumped into the artery, which pushes it through your entire venous system. So it's like, you're going through here, you go down your arm, go down the torso, you go down the leg. And once you drain the blood from the jugular, it's going right down the table into a little like porta potty thing, right into the sewer system. They will clamp off the veins so they can get some perfusion in there, which pushes the fluids all to the fingertips. So they're giving the body a massage during this last point. So you can think of it that you're getting a massage. So they're pushing all the blood out of your body and getting the colored fluid in there. And then they will tie these off, both of these with ligature string, and then they will put a little powder in there that becomes a concrete and sew it up. My favorite stitch is baseball stitch because it's easy to do. But you learn a bunch of different stitches and suturing in mortuary school to close different kinds of openings. So after the body has been embalmed, then there's one more step, and it's called aspirating. They take a long, hollow sword, basically, right? And it's about the width of your finger, your pointer finger. So it's got a tip on it that's really sharp, and they angle it at your navel 2 inches over and then 2 inches up from that belly button. And the first aim is to go straight up to the heart. And they go through the diaphragm, straight up into the heart. And the thing that I observed about embalmers when they would train you is that they were looking for this thing called a heart tap. And if you could get the heart tap, your first hit, that meant you were a good embalmer. And what it is it's hitting those lower chambers of the heart and pulling out the blood that's remaining. You may want to edit all this out. But then you have to hit the lungs, you have to hit the stomach, and you can tell what organs you're hitting with this needle that's sucking, um, based on the color that comes out. So if you got like coffee ground looking stuff, that's typically the stomach or the intestines. Yellow is typically the bladder. Foamy stuff is typically from the lungs. You get all the way up into the trachea here because you don't want the body to purge, which some bodies do after embalming. It's again, an intense process. You're putting a lot of pressure on the venous system in the body. You will have leakage sometimes from the eyes or the mouth or the nose, and they take extra precautions to stop that too, which is aspirating the mouth with a little kind of hook thing. So, after the aspirating is done and you're not getting any more fluid sucked out, then what they will do is take that trocar, which the long hollow needle is called a trocar, and they will hook it up to a bottle of cavity fluid, which is very intense formaldehyde mixture, which is meant to set the organs so they don't decompose. And this is gravity injected with this trocar into the different orifices in the body. And then some embalmers will wait till the next day and then suck it back out again. Some will leave it and they close it off with a little tornado corkscrew that's about a half an inch long and a half an inch wide. It looks like a little tornado, and it's a plastic button basically that closes that hole. And then they wash your hair and dry you and put on your powder,
Do your
your makeup.
makeup. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I didn't pass out from that discussion because I'm the type of person who, when I get blood test, I pass out. It's just,
Yes.
and I think
Me
I'm going
too.
to have to warn my older brother about this episode before he
Oh yeah.
listens to it because he too. It's like,
You should have heard the earlier renditions of me telling these tales. Yeah, I've toned it down a lot.
well, I appreciate that. So thank you. And thank you for that summary, that description, because it's the first time I've heard that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You've described the funeral industry as being money driven and sometimes unethical and unfair. Can you elaborate on that for a bit?
Yeah. One of the breaking examples for me to get out of this industry, one of the last employers I had, and I won't identify which one, but one of the last employers that I had, when you cremate a body, the industry standard is to put the body in a cardboard container. It's for dignity of the deceased and also so that body will go into the retort, which is the crematory oven, smoothly. Because if you take your hand and you rub it across the top of a tabletop, all your fingers spread out. Imagine putting a body into a
Mm.
retort and they just spread out everywhere. So that's the decency and the purpose of this box. Sometimes families will come and decorate the box if a funeral director or a death doula encourages it and gives them, it's like you have to have permission if you don't know that this is something people have done or will do ideas. So some people will decorate the box, et cetera, so forth. This is a standard in the industry with a direct cremation. You get the box that you're cremated in, and then you get the temporary container at the end rather than purchase and charge these families the $35 or $20 that it was, $50, whatever it was for these cremation containers. The employer that I was at was collecting Amazon boxes and shipping boxes in what I thought was a recycle area. And my first week there, this individual is placing these broken down cardboard boxes on a little table in front of the retort, and they bring out a deceased individual, did not take them out of the plastic that they had been wrapped in and duct taped in, which is kind of an industry standard when you bring a body into your care that's not being embalmed. But another standard is to take them out of that. My whole thing is they didn't come into the world wrapped in a plastic bag. Why are you going to cremate them or bury them in a plastic bag? Excuse me.
Yeah, it's very disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Hold the body from the gurney onto the table with the cardboard boxes. And I said, is this how you're going to cremate this person? And he looked over me, over the body at me, and said, aren't you into recycling and all this green stuff? So, yeah, when I tried to whistleblow, nothing came of it. But this individual was able to weaponize my social media against me, the industry hating me, and they came right for my license because I turned him in.
And unlike other industries, there is no way for you to be protected as a whistleblower.
Right. Not that I've discovered yet, but it has made me very cautious about what I want to say anymore, um, because of how callous the industry has been to me. But it does make me more driven to get out to communities and to death doulas and other alternative death space people before they have to face a funeral home. Going to conventions was another big wake up call. Seeing the vendors and the way they wined and dined the high roller funeral homes and the techie people, and seeing the different products they were coming up with and seeing the markup on them really felt super predatory the more I was around it and seeing people glorify this stuff. So I made it a point anytime I was showcasing something on my Instagram or later TikTok, it had to be something I would use or that I would recommend to people. So I made great friendships with like Titan Casket, for example. If people don't know about them, and you're getting buried, that's an excellent outside the industry, but in the industry vendor for caskets that are biodegradable all the way up to the shiniest, prettiest metal in multiple colors. They have they even have it where you can like customize them.
If I am shopping and I'm working with a funeral home, can I request that they get the casket from Titan, or is that like they won't do it?
So they will not. Some may. If they're a progressive and, you know, transparent funeral home, they won't dissuade you from shopping outside the funeral home. Um, but what I've noticed in the industry is that they don't like it. It cuts down on their bottom line. They don't want a third party casket brought in. Then they have the trash, which is the cardboard packaging, very eco-friendly packaging, in my opinion, on these caskets, so they get there not scratched and nice. They complain about the packaging having to be thrown in their dumpsters, or they want to charge a delivery fee, but the Federal Trade Commission has made it where you cannot charge a delivery fee or a holding fee for a third-party casket, thankfully. Federal
Mm.
Trade Commission is picking up some of the pieces that they have long left hanging on the floor, basically.
If I am working with someone, how do I request? How would I say I'm going to be using this casket? And that's it. This is,
You just order it and say, this, we ordered a casket already online from Titan Casket, or even if you shop Walmart.com, Costco.com, they're all Titan caskets.
ooh,
So yeah, they were the first ones that like, okay, I can't say they were the first ones to get on Costco, but to my knowledge, they were providing to Costco caskets section before anyone else.
go Costco.
I know, right? But yeah, you can have these caskets delivered to your home. You can have them delivered directly to the funeral home. And typically, when you're doing funeral arrangements, from the time of death to the service, within 24 to 48 hours, sometimes 72. And when you communicate with third party casket companies, even if you are building your own casket or shrouding a body, something I like to do. They sell these burial shrouds and things like that are made overseas and then brought over here and marketed as green. Um, not Titan, but vendors, for example. You can go to your grandma's closet and find beautiful patterns that are probably 100% cotton that a body could be shrouded in. Um, you just take pillowcases and you cut them into strips, and that's your binding material. People can put flowers all around them. One of my mentors, thinking of that, had her mother lying in state on her kitchen table at her house in Austin, Texas, and they surrounded her with flowers. And it didn't look like a kitchen table. It looked like this beautiful farewell boat, basically, for this beautiful woman that they sat, I believe it's Shiva. Is it Shiva? Yeah, they sat with her, and then the next day, buried her. So people don't realize that they can do these things because they don't talk about death often ahead of time.
I know that
And people aren't.
you do look at products and you really evaluate them. I think that there's that mushroom shroud, and you were like you weren't very positive about it. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Let's talk about the mushroom burial shroud. Okay. So I was attending a death salon in Houston, Texas. I say back in 2016 or 2017, but Kermit was a wee pup. And I was introduced to J. Rim Lee, who had created the mushroom burial shroud, had a TED talk. She was looking for a test client, somebody that wanted to be buried in a burial park, where they could incorporate a researcher. Well, I'm in Austin and University of Texas, Austin. And then you've got Eloise Woods Natural Burial Park, which is the beautiful, beautiful conservation burial park that's outside of Austin. Anyway, um, so I had the land connection and all I needed was the person connection, right? So I met a family and they turned out to be the perfect family for this. They wanted a burial at Eloise Woods. Mom was declining. So I talked to them and I said, hey, we have this lady that created this mushroom burial shroud. At most, it will grow mushrooms and do all these magical things underground. At worst, your mother had a beautiful burial in beautiful land, wrapped up in fabric, covered in, crystals and flowers and all of that stuff. At worst. And you get a free burial. And I volunteered my services for free. They only had to pay for a death certificate. And J. Rimley flew in the night before the burial with the mystery shrouded suit. So at this point, you had already seen the black suits, the mushroom burial suits with the veins on them and whatnot. You'd already seen those like on TED Talks and things like that, where she shows up with a khaki colored fabric and it smells like mushrooms. I mean, it legitimately smells like it, but the spores were infused into this fabric, basically. She had never seen a deceased body before, to, and she stood against the wall while I shrouded the individual and talked to her about it. The next day, she was at the burial, and what the researcher did was bury PVC pipe into the corner of the grave, and then it had another runway, so they could run a camera down there or a little, snapper thingy, and it could test the soil because they tested the soil before the burial. The point was to test it after a certain amount of time, and it was supposed to, the toxins would be gone from the soil and blah blah. So they wanted to prove that it improved the soil quality, and they also wanted to see, what was going on. So time went by after this burial, and Jay Rimley stopped communicating with the researcher, stopped communicating with the cemetery because we were supposed to get cats and bury those too, like cats from the animal shelter that didn't make it or whatever, and then have a section for pets in these burial shrouds as well. She stopped communicating. So I went and had coffee with the researcher, and she said she hadn't gotten paid and that it was just done. And she wanted to give me the shrouds that she had left, the cat shrouds. So I very happily took them. I still have some of them. They still kind of smell like mushrooms, but I don't know. To my knowledge, they don't do anything. And my big heartbreak with this was that they got Luke Perry's family involved. Like, granted, this is a beautiful idea. Luke Perry is an actor from 90210 and Riverdale and different things like that. I ended up having a conversation with his daughter on Instagram because I was being tagged in stuff where she was commenting about her dad's mushroom burial. And we got into DMs, and I was like, look, it doesn't work the way that it's told to do it. They had invited her to speak at the funeral memorial. Like, I was anyway, so it doesn't work like it's supposed to, but even if people are telling you that this doesn't work from what they're hearing from me, your dad had a beautiful burial on his land, wrapped in fabric and love. Who could ask for anything more?
Yeah.
So what if the mushrooms didn't grow? They're going to grow on top of the soil
Yeah.
if it's the right climate. We don't need to know what's going on underneath anyway. Leave nature to nature. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
story right there. Um,
And now they're gone. You can't, they're not online anymore. The organizations that were pushing them so hard aren't pushing them anymore. They're jumping on other bandwagons that are not exactly green, but whatever.
yeah, the green funeral industry is obviously more environmentally friendly, but is it more ethical? And what can they be doing better than they are today?
Um, yeah, definitely. So what I've noticed in the funeral industry over my time here, which again began in 1997, with a little break in between, so it wasn't solid the whole time. What I've discovered is that you've got techies and money jumping into the funeral game now, and they have been for the last 7 years, really getting into it, having no idea what the fuck they're doing or what they're doing. So we have a lot of improvement to be made in the green funeral space, especially now that money has become even more prevalent in death care. We're talking about death care companies going on Shark Tank and things like that. That was unheard of before. Um, so, in the case of aquamation, water cremation, there is a company funeral home in Las Vegas that has exceeded any and all expectations of what can be done with this process to make it the most eco-friendly. Now, Las Vegas is in a drought. Well, you would think all that water to cremate a body, it takes about a day's worth of water. You get up, you brush your teeth, you go potty, flush the toilet, you take a shower, you're dead. But it's like you're here for one more day using that amount of water. They have figured out a way to recycle the effluent so that water can be reused, and the amino acids, peptides, salts, fats, all the nutrient rich part can be removed, and then fertilizer.
I'm sorry.
Kidding.
So I apologize before we were interrupted, but go on with you're talking about Las Vegas, and
Yeah.
they're in a desert. They're in drought always.
So yeah, they've figured out a way to recycle their water. When you water cremate a person, just a real quick breakdown, the body is put into a machine and then it fills with 95% water and a 5% sodium hydroxide, sodium potassium mixture. And then that breaks down all the soft tissues. I like to call it one last spa day for your corpse. People were like, it's like Breaking Bad. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Go away from there and go to the spa day. So you are amino acids, fats, peptides, salt, everything that's chock good of nutrients for plant growth. So it could be reincorporated into a sod farm, different things like that. You could be the prettiest grass in the land.
Ah,
Uh, so they've figured out how to do that. We just need to get that kind of technology everywhere else, because you've got municipalities that are freaking out about the liquid going into their drainage system, when in reality, they're afraid it's going to clean things up too much in the pipes. And then we're going to have breakdown of pipes and different things like that. So there's a lot of room to grow in the water cremation space. But I think by far, out of the more alternative ways, it is the most green.
mm,
Um, Equal to that in the more contemporary way is conservation burial, because you're using way less resources there too, and you're protecting land that you're buried on forever and ever and ever. But sometimes that can be financial burden on people being able to get to that point, find the land and find the burial spot and different things like that. So I like to tell them those are the two that I would recommend first and foremost, would be the conservation burial and the aqua cremation, water cremation. Um, when it comes to the human composting, I think it's great that it came along. However, I think they jumped the gun, and I want people to think about this. Where is their mulch, their material that starts this process? The alfalfa, stuff like that, the wood bits. Where is it coming from? How far away is it from the facility where this process is happening? If this is a crop that technically feeds animals normally, that would become part of the human food chain, it doesn't do that. So it ceases there. And so that kind of all the water and all the labor intensity that was put into growing that crop just kind of stops there. And when it's used to compost a body, you're not actually getting what is technically considered soil at the end of this process. And I think that they've done a disservice to the community by labeling it as soil. It very much looks like mulch, broken down mulch. Um, when you also think about the big warehouses that they're having to run electricity for, and some of these warehouses have already been in existence. They weren't built from the ground up, so they're not eco-friendly as they could be, with like solar panels and different things like that. So you've got to think about, what is the facility that they're housed in? Is it eco-friendly? Are they having guests come in and out? Are you running air conditioning all the time to entertain your guests, your special lighting, your music, your food that you're giving them? Or, all of these things I've learned in the last, 8 years of my career, they cost money and they cost energy and time. So you can buy carbon offset credits and say, hey, we're buying these magical carbon offset credits to make us a more green company. And all you're doing is just making yourself feel better, because where do those go? Things like that. So then at the end of this labor intensive breakdown process of natural organic reduction, not every family can take a pickup bed full of their loved ones' remains home. So they might get a little urn or a little vessel of something. But where's the rest of that going to go? Oh, it's going to go almost all the way to Portland because they don't have a local facility to put it at, or a local area within the city limits or near the city limits to put it. So they have to make arrangements to take it further away.
Mm.
And many of these companies have had and lost relationships with these organizations or these places where they were putting their soil, and have had to scramble to find another one last minute to continue to accept the amount that they're having to disperse.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's like 5 or 6 huge, like,
Yeah.
sacks, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a beautiful option for people. I think it's just incredibly high priced when you get the same result almost, except you can't take it home by doing a conservation or natural burial.
Yeah. What are the biggest misconceptions that people have about green funerals? I mean, we just spoke about one with with terramation or with body composting, right? But
Mhm.
are there any other misconceptions that you constantly run into?
In the green specter or just the whole funeral industry?
Green in the green.
In the green specter. Um, a lot of funeral homes don't want to do it because they're afraid.
Hmm.
They have control over how a body looks and breaks down when they embalm them to a degree, you know, depending on how the person died or, you know,
Do
different factors, they can break down faster in refrigeration.
mm,
So they're afraid to offer these things because they don't know how the body will maintain. And something that those of us who have actually done this have learned is keep the body dry. You can't just put them in a plastic bag in the refrigerator. It's just like your food, think of your sandwich. You don't want a moldy sandwich. You don't want a moldy decedent. So there are extra steps they have to take that they aren't quite trained on,
mm.
that maybe they're more like, well, embalming makes the person look better, or da 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 da. I've seen this in action. Like one, this one just came to mind. One of the higher end funeral homes that I worked for had a salesman that was a funeral director. And we would have families of different cultures come in because it was a big city. They would want their loved one flown out of the country, which is a labor intensive process. Lots of paperwork, lots of phone calls. Um, this individual, they would go in to look at the caskets, and the family would hover towards the lower cost ones for whatever reason. He would tell them, well, most people in your culture get this one. And it would be several $1,000s up the line. And they would be like, are you sure? And he'd be like, everybody flies their loved one out in this one. And so it would be like peer pressure from the dead and the living to upgrade to what they thought was the cultural norm. So yeah, that was another one. Is that
Yeah,
good?
yeah. So not only are your parents judging you when they're alive, but after they pass away, they're still continuing to judge you. Is that it?
Possibly, but it could also be that they're yelling at you from the other side, like, I didn't want this, just bury me.
More likely,
Save
much
the
more
money.
likely. Um,
Mhm.
in your work, what role does transparency play? Because now you are not in the role of funeral director, even though you are one. So what are you doing to help? I know that you do a lot of things.
Yeah. So when I'm at my best, I'm doing, you know, like back in Austin, Texas. All of this was before COVID. It's
Mm.
trying to find your footing in public after COVID has been a little bit of a challenge, especially having to work for everybody else. But what I used to do, I had a orange metal casket, and I would take it to the farmers markets, or the craft fairs and things like that, with little handouts about death and dying, or about alternative funerals. This orange casket had ball pit balls in it, and you could order bags of hundreds off Amazon. So it was filled with ball pit balls, and I'd roll up in a van, take it out, and put it out, and have all my stuff set up. And people would come lay in the casket. It was a test passed by. So they'd take pictures and stuff, be in the casket. Later on, I got a wooden one with wool balls in it, so it was more eco-friendly. The dog would get in the casket. The
Mm.
people would be in the casket with the dog. I had acrobats in the casket one time that were doing handstands from laying to standing. Just amazing that you see when people see something and then their curiosity takes over and they start asking questions. Or the dog was an excellent accidental installation to all of this, was that you come for the dog, you stay for the death education,
Yeah.
or you came for the death education and oh, you stay for the dog.
Yeah, you're talking about Kermit the dog, your grief therapy assistant, correct?
Yes.
So, how does having Kermit involved changed the experience for the people that you work with?
Oh goodness. So, hmm, something that I noticed at first when I was training him, I would ask the nursing homes. I did removals at all hours of the day and night. So I'd
Mhm.
ask removals, funeral home, nursing homes. When I was coming to do a removal in the middle of the night, at first it was when no family was there, and then when family was there, would they like to spend time with the therapy dog while I handled the client, transferring them onto the gurney, etc. He'd either hang out at the nurse's station, or he'd be there with the family, or he'd wait in the car. It's whatever they were all most comfortable with. And then he started making visits into the hospital with me, walking along the gurney, going into the room, sitting in
Mm.
the corner while I transfer over, walking out with me. Then we started doing presentations at like hospices and things. He'd work the room. When he got into the funeral home setting as a traditional setup, people would come in for visitations and he'd sit at the entrance and let them approach him. Or he'd figure out, okay, this person over here is really struggling. And he'd go over to him and he'd put his
Mm.
head on their lap.
Mm.
And he's just the greatest judge of character. One of the most moving things that I saw was there was a widow that came in with her family, all of her kids, everybody, to make arrangements for her husband. And she wouldn't talk. She would not look up. She just kept sniffling, wiping her tears. And the family was just encouraging, Mom, please help us. And something brought up, whether I had a pin with my dog on it or they saw the sign in the front door that says we have a therapy dog on staff. They were like, can we meet the dog? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so brought him in and I sat down, I'm doing my paperwork. He makes his way around the room saying hi to everybody and they're all, oh, oh, oh. And then everything kind of calms down and it's quiet. And then the lady looks up and she answers a question. I'm expecting the family to answer, and she answers. And everybody looks at her and she's moving her hand in her lap. And I look down and Kermit is in her lap.
Mm.
She started communicating with us. She had Kermit sit with the family at the service, which was great for me because then I didn't have to worry about where he was going to be. Yeah, just different things like that. An animal just helps.
Yeah, they
I'm
do.
so fortunate to have him.
They're wonderful companions, knowing that I grew up with dogs, but I have three cats now, and they bring a lot into everyone's life. They make, as you
Yeah.
saw with Merlin coming up onto the table, they just spread joy. That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Everybody smiles.
what future developments would you like to see in the death care industry and the funeral industry?
I think the future of funeral directing is about the individual to the families. Just
Mhm.
like I think death doulas are going to move into that role. Body care disposition will be handled by big facilities, kind of like what's already happening now, except you're going to have more small individual people making these arrangements and stuff, and then giving more power back to the people, or being able to just, they already have it where you can just do everything online and get a box in the mail of cremated remains or have them scattered somewhere. So I think there's already a big hands off switch, but with the education that's coming out and the implication of death doulas into the community, we're also getting the more hands on switch. And something that was asked to me, I think back in 2014 or 2015, um, by Colin Perry. She was doing an article for one of the funeral director magazines, and she asked me, "Do you think death doulas," and this is when they were like brand new, coming on the scene. "Do you think death doulas are going to be in the future of death care, and how should funeral directors, embrace this?" And I said, "Absolutely. Um, I think we need to be prepared. I think we need to have arrangements and uh, relationships with those individuals in our communities in order to best serve our client families." And the industry as a whole went, "Right." Yeah. Now look,
What?
they're all freaking out online and posting, like they have these little sly funeral groups where they post memes and make fun of stuff. And a death doula got a hold of one of these memes that they made about, death doulas coming in, and it was inappropriate. And you could tell that the man that made this meme was very butthurt.
Mm,
And it made me happy that he was butthurt enough to make that, because that means that the death doulas in this movement toward being more educated in end of life is happening. It's
yeah,
finally rolling.
yeah.
And I feel like I've been standing on the sidelines pushing this rock for a long, long time. So
Yeah.
we're getting there.
I'd like to say that there is a love-hate relationship with how funeral directors in the funeral industry see death doulas, but
Yeah.
it's not love-hate. I mean, it's really there is that
They're
tension there,
salty.
unfortunately. Yeah, and um, you see with the legal issues that are happening now, and luckily in the cases, the majority of cases where we're taken to court,
Hmm.
um, the courts have sided with the death doula.
Yeah.
So that's really good to see, because the funeral industry is very powerful, very
Hmm.
powerful.
Hmm.
Um, well,
Yes.
Melissa, I know that we are out of time almost. I want to thank
Okay.
you for joining us today. If listeners want to learn more about you or Kermit or get in touch, how can they do that?
TheModernMortician.com, TheModernMortician@gmail.com, Instagram and TikTok, _modern_mortician. Um, yeah, I can be
Wonderful.
found. And I do respond to DMs. That's something that people are really shocked about. I don't have a huge following, but I do. I do, but I don't. But people are always shocked that I respond to DMs. And you could be anywhere in the world or the country and ask me a question about this, and I want to help. I don't want to put up blocks, paywalls, anything like that. The more I can get this information out into the public, the more I can help you and everybody else.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, folks, we've heard a lot today about the importance of transparency in the funeral industry and making informed choices to ensure that we're not being taken advantage of. Understanding the practices and the options available to us is key to making decisions that truly honor our loved ones and align with our own values. It's crucial to continue these conversations, not only to protect ourselves from potential exploitation, but also to promote a more ethical and compassionate approach within the industry. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.